Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Armenian folklore, written down by A.G. Seklemian. In the story, we read about some amazing twins. It has echoes of a Turkish tale from before, and one from Bengal, but that is no surprise. Okay, let's begin. The Twins. In the springtime, a certain king pitched his tent in a flowery meadow track, among the shady trees and near a babbling brook. 3 sisters came from the village, maidens of marriageable age, to gather flowers and tasty vegetables. At noon they sat down on the bank of the crystal brook, not far from the royal tent, and began to shoot the breeze. "If the king takes me in marriage for his oldest son," said the oldest maiden, "I will weave for him a tent so big that it will accommodate all his army, and still half of it will be empty. If the king takes me in marriage for his second son," said the second maiden, "I will weave for him a rug so big that it will accommodate all of his court and all the people of the realm, and half of it will still be left empty." "I won't brag," said the youngest sister, "but if the king takes me in marriage for his youngest son, and if it pleases heaven, I will give birth to twins, a silver-haired boy and a golden-haired girl." The 2 older maidens laughed at their younger sister and ridiculed her. The king, who was listening to the talk of the maidens from behind the arras, was pleased with them, and gave all 3 in marriage to his sons. One day he asked the oldest sister, "Where is the tent which you were going to weave?" "It was only vain prattle we sisters were indulging in," she said. "Where is your rug?" inquired the king of the second sister. "It was merely idle talk," she replied. "And where are your twins?" he asked the youngest sister. "If it pleases heaven, I will bear them in the fullness of time," she replied. The older sisters became very envious of their younger sister, and they vowed revenge, for now the love and caress of the whole court seemed to be bestowed upon her. One night, the promised silver-haired boy and golden-haired girl came to the youngest sister. The envious sisters immediately took the babies away and put them into a chest, which they threw into the river. Bringing a pair of puppies, they placed them by the bedside of the young mother. Then they went to the young prince and informed him that his beloved wife was the mother of the 2 puppies. The young prince was horror-stricken. The king was mad with rage. He ordered his servants to wrap the young woman in a camel's hide and put her in the corner by the palace door, so that everyone who entered the palace might spit in her face, for her bad behavior had brought shame upon those who loved and favored her. The king's order was at once put into execution. It so happened that there was an old man and his wife living in a hut on the banks of the river, on the outskirts of the city. The old man used to cast his nets into the river every day and catch 2 fish, one for himself and one for his wife. On that day he threw his net in for the fish, and lo, a chest was drawn out. He took it to his hut, where he and his wife opened it, and saw that there was a pair of pretty babies. The silver-haired boy had put his thumb into the mouth of the golden-haired girl, and the girl had put her thumb into the mouth of the boy, so they were sucking one another's thumbs and were not crying at all. The aged couple looked upon them with great joy and said, "Thank heaven! Until now we were without offspring, and lo, heaven has now granted us twins." The old dame washed the babies, and lo, gold and silver fell down from their hair. She said to her husband, "Now, husband, get up and take this gold and silver to the mart, and buy a cow for us, so that we may feed the milk to the babies." The old man went, and with the silver and gold, bought not only a cow, but a great many other things necessary for the twins, who were to be brought up with great care and kindness, although in an obscure hut. The children grew rapidly, and became a great comfort to the aging couple. The boy grew to be a beautiful lad, and became a hunter, and the girl grew to be a brave, intelligent maiden. The old couple, following the course of the world, died when the children were quite young. The girl had only heard once from the old woman that they were fished from the river in a chest, and that the despised woman in the king's palace door was their mother, who the king's 2 daughters-in-law had put in that position by falsehood. After the death of their benefactors, the sister and brother continued to live in the hut. The lad went hunting, and the maiden used to visit the court, for the purpose of seeing her mother, but, following the advice of her deceased godmother, she did not let herself be known, lest mischief befall herself and her brother. She learned, however, all that was going on in the royal palace. One day, the lad hunted for an antelope, and found a fine one, which he secured. "This is worthy of the king," said the lad, and he took it to the palace. The king was very much pleased. On another day he shot a lion, whose skin he took to the king, who said to him, "Good for you, my little hunter. Come tomorrow to the palace again. I will praise you before my men." The lad came home and told his sister that he was invited to the palace by the king. "Good," said the maiden. "Take this bouquet with you. When you enter the king's palace, you will see there, in a corner, a woman wrapped in the hide of a camel, and buried in the dust up to her waist. All who enter the door spit in her face. For my sake, do throw these bunch of roses to her as you pass by her." "All right," said the lad, and on the following day, as he was entering the palace, he threw a bunch of roses to the despised woman. He then entered the king's apartment, where both the king and the courtiers were very much pleased with him. His manly bearing and intelligent conversation were the subject of general admiration. But the king's 2 daughters-in-law were very much displeased with the little hunter, who threw a bunch of roses to their disgraced sister instead of spitting at her. They thought that there was something at the bottom of this lad's conduct, and said to one another, "Let's find out a means of getting rid of this urchin, lest our secret should leak out." As they had great influence in the king and the court, they went to the king and said, "Long live the king! You see that lad is an expert hunter. He has brought you a lion's hide, but it shall be useless as long as there is only one. Send him to bring a dozen more lion skins to adorn the new palace." The king liked the suggestion, and sent the lad to bring him a dozen lion skins. The lad came home and told his sister, who said to him, "Brother, when our godmother died, she told me that we had an aunt living somewhere among the rocks of yonder black mountains. In case some difficult task was imposed upon us by the court, we might go to our aunt, who would always be glad to help us. So you had better go to her. She will show you how to hunt 12 lions." The lad started towards the Black Mountains. There, in a deep cavern, he saw an old fairy woman sitting. He ran to her, and at once kissed her hand. "Halloo!" exclaimed the old silver dame. "Is it you, the silver-haired twin?" "Aye, auntie, it is I," answered the lad. "And how does your golden-haired sister thrive?" the fairy woman asked. "She humbly kisses both of your hands, auntie," said the lad. "And what have you come for, my boy?" inquired the fairy dame. "The king wants from me a dozen lion skins," answered the lad. "Well, then, come and hide yourself under my apron until your 40 cousins come," said the old woman, hiding the lad in the folds of her skirt. Soon the 40 fairies, the sons of the old dame, came, and smelling the lad, exclaimed, "How now, mother? Have you prepared a meal of human meat today?" "No, sons," answered the dame, "unless you are so cruel as to eat your own human cousin." "Where is he, mother?" inquired the 40. "We will not hurt him, but talk to him." The lad came out from under the apron of his fairy aunt. The 40 brothers were very much pleased with him, and kissed him in turn. Then they asked him about his errand, and when the lad told them, they said, "That is nothing, cousin. We will give you 12 lion skins, which we are now using as quilts, and replace them with new ones tomorrow." They gave the lad the lion skins to carry to the king, and also a tent as a present to his golden-haired sister. The lad came home, and giving the tent to his sister, took the skins to the king, who was highly pleased with them. But the 2 women were more uneasy now than ever, and asked the king to send the lad to bring 7 pairs of elephants' tusks, in order to decorate the new palace with ivory. The king, not knowing that the intention of the wicked women was to destroy the youth, sent him to bring the ivory. The lad went again to his fairy cousins and told his errand. "Cousin," said the 40 brothers, "we can bring you 7 pairs of elephants' tusks, but you must bring us a saw and 7 horse-loads of 7-year-old wine." The lad went back to the city, and getting the saw and the 7 skins full of old wine, loaded them on 7 horses and brought them to the fairies, who took them to the pool, which was the elephants' watering place. They emptied the water from the pool and filled it with wine. At night, the elephants came to drink, and not knowing that it was wine, they were soon drunk and fell down senseless. Thereupon the fairies cut off their tusks and brought them to the lad. Besides this, they also gave him a rug as a present for the golden-haired maiden. The lad came home, and giving the rug to his sister, he took the ivory to the king, who was very much pleased with it. But the king's 2 daughters-in-law were very angry at the lad's success, and went again to the king, saying, "Long live the king! The new palace is nicely decorated with lion-skins and ivory, but it has one deficiency, and that is a beautiful mistress to dwell in it. The King of India's daughter must live there. Her beauty is unequaled in the world, and as your youngest son is without a wife, she will be his wife. Send the little hunter to bring her." The king was persuaded and sent the lad on the errand. The youth again went to his fairy cousins, who invited the daughter of the King of India and delivered her to the lad. They also gave him a table, which served itself as a present. He fell in love with the maiden at first sight, and she also fell in love with the lad, but as he had promised to take her to the king, he did so. The king ordered him to take the maiden to the new palace, and invited the lad, who was the hero of so many great deeds, to a private banquet at the palace. The 2 wicked women, seeing that they could not destroy the lad by sending him on difficult errands, were mad with anger. The lad went home and told his sister that the king had invited him for the following day. "Brother," said the maiden, "when you go tomorrow to the king's palace, take your hound with you. Let it go before you, and you only step wherever it has stepped. And when you eat, first give your dog the meat to eat. If you see it has not hurt him, you may eat the meat. But if he dies, be careful not to eat, lest you die also." On the following day the lad did as the maiden had advised him, and sent the dog before him. Just under the threshold of the door there was a deep pit dug, which was discovered by the dog walking before him, and he avoided it. Entering in, he cast the bouquet which his sister had given to him to the woman in the dust. And when he was called to the table, he gave a piece of the food to the dog, and lo, it died at once. Thereupon he withdrew, saying, "I am not hungry today. I had my meal before I came." He refused to touch any of the food, in spite of the polite entreaties of the king's 2 daughters-in-law. Then, in his interview with the king, he asked his majesty to accept his invitation and come to his humble home for dinner, with all the court. The king, who by this time had become very fascinated with the appearance of the youth, accepted his invitation. In the evening the lad came home and told his sister what had happened. "Do you know who dug the pit under the threshold?" asked the maiden. "Who?" said the lad. "The king's 2 daughters-in-law," said the maiden, "in order that you might fall into it and be killed." "But they were so friendly and polite," said the lad. "And do you know why your dog died?" inquired the maiden. "Why?" said the lad. "The king's 2 daughters-in-law had poisoned the food in order to kill you," said the maiden. "Strange!" exclaimed the lad. "What have I done to them?" "And do you know who the woman is who is buried in the dust, and to whom you have given bunches of roses, while all others spat at her?" asked the maiden. "Oh, her lot is most pitiful. For heaven's sake, tell me who she is," said the lad. "She is our mother, the one who gave us our existence," she said. How?" exclaimed the lad impatiently. The maiden told him everything. She also told him that it was their cruel aunts who, wanting to destroy him, had persuaded the king to send him on dangerous errands. Then sister and brother planned how to entertain the king on the following day. They at first pitched the tent sent by the fairies, and lo, it was so large that the whole kingdom could be entertained in it. Then they stretched the rug, and lo, it was as large as a tent. Then they put in the middle of it a wishing table, which served as much and as many kinds of food as one desires. On the following day the king with all the court and the army came, and seeing the tent the king said to himself, "Aha! This is the tent that my oldest daughter-in-law would weave." Entering in, he saw the immense rug and said to himself, "This is the rug which my second daughter-in-law was boasting about." All his army was entertained, and there was still room for as many more people. The king fell into a deep meditation, and thought that there must be something at the bottom of it all. The foods served from the wishing table were so various and delicious that the king was very much pleased. And at the end of the banquet, while all the crowd was listening, he said to the twins, "Ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you, even half of my kingdom." "Is there anything more precious than father and mother?" said the twins. "Mighty king, give us our father and mother." "Although I am a king," said the king, "do not forget that I am human. Is it possible that a human should give you your lost parents?" "How is it," said the twins, "that you believe that a human being can give birth to dogs, and you do not believe a human being to be able to restore lost parents? If one is true, the other also must be true." A thunderbolt suddenly falling from the sky would not have frightened the king's two daughters-in-law as much as these words did. "What do you mean?" said the king with a trembling voice. The twins told them their story, at the end of which the lad took off his cap, displaying his silver hair, and the maiden took off her headdress, letting fall her rich golden locks. Thereupon the king embraced his grandchildren, weeping loudly because of great joy. Then they embraced the prince, their father, and their dear wronged mother, who was immediately released from her disgraceful punishment. The king at once ordered the furnace to be heated to 7 times the usual heat, and the 2 wicked women were thrown into the fire. Then a wedding was celebrated for 40 days and nights, and the lad was married to the daughter of the king of India, who he had brought to the palace. Thus heaven rewarded the good and punished the evil. 3 apples fell from heaven, 1 for me, 1 for the storyteller, and 1 for him who entertained the company. The end. Wow, that was a heck of a story. I remember something like this from another folk tale from far away. Revenge and bad things coming to bad people. I was a bit sad that the dog died. It's like, dog didn't have anything to do with it. Why did he get poisoned? But I did love the fairies helping out the brother and the sister being the brains of the outfit. I look forward to reading more of these stories. And the podcast shoutout is to Radio Omniglot. This podcast is usually only a few minutes long, but it does a great job of putting related words together or sets of vocab. There's also a language quiz and lots of other fun language stuff. And if you like the site and the pod as much as I do, give them a listen, a like, and a review. And the listener shoutout goes to the Bender district in Moldova. First written about as an important place for goods under the rule of Peter the Good of Moldova in 1408. This city has been in contact with many peoples. The Crimean Tartars, the Genoese, the Ottomans, the Swedes, and the Cossacks have all come to the city to trade or trying to conquer them. I love that the old name for the city is Tyagianyagyaca. It's an old Slavonic name, and when you see it written, it makes sense. I hope one day to take a picture at Bender Castle. The main language of the region is Romanian, so I say to my listener in Bender Castle, Mulțumesc și noapte bună. Thank you, and good night.